It's such a pleasure to bring back one of our favorites in the United States Senate. He is the senator from Texas, former presidential candidate, author of a already, I think, going to be a New York Times bestseller, One Vote Away. It's Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, welcome back to the show, sir.
Chris, it's great to be back with you. Thanks for having me.
I understand you're in quarantine. Is that right?
I am. I'm not sick, and I tested negative. But last week I spent quite a bit of time with Senator Mike Lee, who unfortunately has tested positive and did get sick, although Mike is getting better. And so the Capitol physician advised that I quarantine, and I decided out of an abundance of caution to do it. So I'm sitting here alone in my apartment in D.C., actually very frustrating because I'm away from my wife and my daughters, sitting here in bedroom slippers, drinking a cup of coffee.
From state to state, the way this has been handled has varied wildly. I do my show, and I live in Pennsylvania every day. But if you're talking about Missouri and Kansas, it's a little different. Your home state of Texas, a little different. How do you assess, if nothing else, isn't this fall, this election, sort of federalism on trial, when it works and when it doesn't?
Well, I think that's right, and I think the outcome is incredibly volatile. I think your home state of Pennsylvania, it may be the most important battleground in the whole country in terms of going one direction or another, and having a real impact for which path we go down. I think if the election focuses on issues and substance and ideas, I think the president will prevail. I think if it's a contrast between free enterprise and the blessings of small business and the American free enterprise system versus socialism and government control and regulations, I think we win that debate. I think if it's a debate between the rule of law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights on the one hand versus anarchy and violence and riots in the street, I think we win that debate as well. And it'll be the people of Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Florida and states all over the country making that decision as to which direction the country needs to go.
Your state of Texas, though, with Governor Abbott, I mean, you had a flare-up like most states did at some point, but the governor there has been pretty consistent that he thinks the citizenry can generally handle it, much like Governor DeSantis in Florida. In your kind of 30,000-foot view of coronavirus now, and mindful that you're quarantined and mindful of what just happened to the president in the White House, how do you think Texas has handled it?
So I think Texas has handled it very well, and I think the country is seeing the consequences of political leadership, and that we've got Democratic governors, Democratic mayors, who are shutting everything down, who are shutting businesses down, shutting schools down, shutting small businesses down, who are destroying jobs. And I think much of that is political. When you look at New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, California, over and over again, you're seeing government edicts that are destroying people's livelihoods and having enormous negative consequences. And in contrast, if you look at other states like my home state of Texas, you look at Florida, you look at Georgia, where you've got Republican governors who are opening up the economy. Now, we need to treat this pandemic seriously. It is a dangerous virus. We need to treat it seriously. We've taken extraordinary steps to fight this virus. We need to continue to protect the most vulnerable. But I believe that the most critical economic priority is to reopen the economy, allow small businesses to reopen, and let people go back to work, and let people go back to school, let kids go back to school. And there are a lot of Democratic politicians that want everything shut down, I believe, because they think it hurts Donald Trump in the election and helps Joe Biden. And if Biden wins, magically, the day after Election Day, these Democratic politicians, everything will be better, go back to work, go back to school, problem solved. And it really, the cynicism of being willing to destroy people's lives and livelihoods because you think you get a short-term political benefit from it, it's really unfortunate.
Senator Ted Cruz with us. His brand new book is called One Vote Away, and I want to focus very specifically on the confirmation process ultimately of Amy Coney Barrett and the hearings to come and your role in the judiciary. That's going to be the capper on this interview, but I thought I might get a couple of other items of business out of the way. And on the coronavirus front, Senator, are you overall pleased? I know your colleague Rand Paul, for instance, seems to have a what do you say, an antagonistic relationship with the likes of a Dr. Fauci. As you look at the coronavirus task force, are you overall pleased with their performance? Do you think there's been too few voices, too many? Where do you come down on that, how it's been managed?
I think there had been a variety of voices, which is good and right. I think some of the voices, Dr. Fauci, obviously has many years' expertise. I don't think his is the only voice that should be listened to, and I think he tends to focus very directly on the health implications without focusing on all of the devastating consequences of the shutdown. And so I'm fine with Dr. Fauci being one of the voices at the table, but I don't think he should be dictating the policy. And what we've seen, when you shut down the economy, when you destroy millions of small businesses, that has a very real public health consequence as well, that when people have their livelihoods devastated, we see increased mental illness, increased depression, we see increased domestic violence, we see increased substance abuse, alcohol abuse. It is a devastating consequence, and I think we need to have an urgency to let people be able to provide for their families. I can tell you in Texas, Texans want to be able to work. They want to be able to open their doors. Now, they want to do so safely. We can use sound science. We can use social distancing. We can use reasonable steps to slow the spread of the virus. But destroying every small business in America, I think, is lunacy, and it has an enormous human cost.
Senator, the debate between Kamala Harris and Vice President Pence, I anticipate to be one of real substance, but the substance therein is going to be wildly divergent in terms of what, the policy prescriptions they recommend for the country. I think you probably have experience having worked alongside Senator Harris. I don't know how much of a relationship you have with her, but I have personally never been able to get beyond her performance during the Justice Kavanaugh hearings. I found that to be just unforgivable, Senator Cruz. And so when I look at her, that's all I remember is her behavior during that time. Should that come up in this debate? If you were the moderator, do you think that's something Vice President Pence should or would bring up tonight?
I think it's more likely to come up in the context of Judge Barrett. Judge Barrett is certainly going to come up, and I think the shameful behavior of Senate Democrats smearing and turning the Kavanaugh hearings into a circus, I expect the vice president to bring that up in the context of the Barrett hearing and what they're getting ready to do right now. I think the vice president's going to do quite well tonight. If you look back 4 years ago when Mike Pence debated Tim Kaine, I think Pence was the clear winner of that debate, and a big part of it is because Tim, who's my colleague in the Senate, he came in really hot. He was attacking. He was angry. He basically behaved like a jerk, which was kind of surprising because Tim generally doesn't behave that way in the Senate. But in the 2016 election, I think the Democratic side convinced themselves that everyone hated Donald Trump, and Tim Kaine had behaved accordingly. I don't think Kamala will make that same mistake. Kamala is formidable. She is charming. She is a very talented politician. And what I hope that the vice president does tonight is focused on issues and substance and draws a contrast between opening up the economy, which he and the president are trying to do, versus shutting down the economy, which is what Joe Biden wants to do. Draws a contrast between kids going back to school or kids staying home. Draws a contrast on the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court is a winning issue. Kamala Harris and the Democrats, they don't want to talk about any issues. They want it to be a personality battle. They want this election to be a referendum. Do you personally like or dislike Donald J. Trump? And they think they win that personality battle. I don't know if they do or not, but I know if we focus on ideas, our ideas work and theirs don't. That's a winning approach. I hope that's the direction Mike takes it tonight. I hope that's the direction the president takes it in any subsequent debate.
You've been a part of debates before, we know, well, through 2016. So you know the debate process. You know what it's like, although maybe more crowded than what we're watching right now. I guess your first blush take of what we saw with Vice President Biden, former Vice President Biden, and the president and Chris Wallace in debate number one. I mean, you personally have been on a stage like that, maybe not quite like that setting, but your takeaway. And by the way, just going forward, how would you like to see presidential debates conducted? Are you pleased with the format generally now?
Look, I thought the format was fine. That debate was a mess.
Yeah.
I thought there was too much interrupting, too much sort of angry insults on both sides, which I thought was counterproductive. I think it would have been better to have a more of a contrast of ideas. I think the president came in really eager, but there were several times where Joe was in the process of destroying himself, and the president jumped in and saved him, which I wish he'd just let Joe talk for a minute, because what Joe was saying wasn't making any sense. I thought the president's best moment was when he drew a contrast and said that he wanted to reopen the economy, let people get back to work, and Joe wanted to shut it all down. I thought that was a very clear contrast. I also thought Chris Wallace did a terrible job moderating. I think he was clearly biased. He might as well have had a Biden for president bumper sticker across the front of his suit. He was snide, he was sneering, it was not a good look. My guess is at the end of the day, I don't think that debate changed a lot of views. I think if you went in supporting Trump, you probably left supporting Trump, and if you went in supporting Biden, you probably left supporting Biden. I hope subsequent debates we focus more on the really radical and out-of-touch agenda that the Democrats are embracing, including things like abolishing the police. I think we need a much more. I hope Mike Pence tonight has a more extensive discussion of abolishing the police. The last debate, Joe Biden just said, "Oh, I oppose abolishing the police," and he got away with it. And Chris Wallace jumped in and said, "Okay, move on. Let's leave it at that."
Right. Let's talk about global warming or something. Yeah.
Yes.
Senator,
it was absurd.
Yeah, it really it was. I mean, to let's move on to global warming was the transition out of I can't remember what it was, but the packing of the court alone, which is where I want to go in just a moment. I'll ask you one more question, Senator Cruz, about just kind of the news of the day, and that is the president announcing on Twitter last night that he wants to declassify everything related to Mrs. Clinton, her phones, the Russia dossier, Russia Gate, Obama Gate, whatever you want to call it, Spygate. He wants to declassify it all. That led a lot of his supporters to ask, why now? Why didn't you do it 2 years ago? What do you know about it, and what do you think about it?
Look, it's a great question. They should have done it 2 years ago. I worry that I'm glad he's doing it.
Yeah.
I worry that it's too little too late. And one of the problems, listen, we just had a hearing with James Comey in Judiciary. I think what the Obama administration did, politicizing and weaponizing the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, was absolutely shameful. I think it did enormous damage to the integrity of those institutions. And the evidence coming out now is really damning. I worry that for a lot of voters, it's confusing. It's hard to really understand. I'll confess, look, my day job is focusing on this, and it can be confusing and hard to understand doing this all day long.
Yes.
So, look, what came out yesterday was fairly stunning. It was, handwritten notes from John Brennan. It was the head of the CIA, and John Brennan is a hard leftist. To give you a sense of just how hard a leftist he is, John Brennan, when Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan were both on the ballot, do you know who John Brennan voted for in 1980?
I don't.
The communist.
Oh, God.
And he's publicly admitted that. He said, Jimmy Carter was not liberal enough. He voted for the nominee of the American Communist Party. That's who John Brennan is.
He was AOC before it was cool then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Brennan's handwritten notes from briefing Obama say that the Hillary Clinton campaign have this scheme to try to accuse the Trump campaign of colluding with Russia. And this is back in the summer of 2016. So what does the Hillary spokesperson say? This is BS. It's the Obama CIA director's handwritten notes about his conversations with Obama. Like, and the media treats it like it doesn't exist. So I'm glad it's being declassified. I don't know that it's going to move any votes. I think it was a grotesque abuse of power. I hope that everyone who broke the law is held accountable, is prosecuted, and is sent to jail. But in terms of the public discourse, I think there's so much noise in the air that the people who are following it are already convinced.
Yes.
And everyone else, it's hard to process.
Senator, can you, I don't know that you can speculate, but can you help those of us who feel very frustrated that this was very slowly rolled out, is slowly being investigated? I think people want more from Durham faster. They want more from Barr faster. They're confused why the president didn't declassify sooner. They're confused why maybe even Senator Graham didn't move more aggressively sooner. Are those criticisms fair of the president's supporters?
I think all of those criticisms are fair. Listen, Bill Barr, I think, is a very good man. I think he is a serious man, and I think he's up to the task of Attorney General. And I think when he took it over, it was almost an impossible job, so that if anyone can do this, I'm hopeful Barr can. Jeff Sessions, the job was too big for him. He was not up for it, and so we wasted a couple of years not being able to dive into it. I wish DOJ were moving swifter. I'm frustrated beyond belief that virtually nobody has been held accountable. It has been 4 years, and this should have happened 3.5 years ago. On the intelligence side, we frankly didn't see any accountability until Rick Grinnell got in there. It was actually amazing that the impact Rick had. I think he was in the job of Director of National Intelligence for 6 weeks.
Right.
And it was extraordinary. Rick is a friend, but I really respect the job he did in 6 weeks. And now, we're seeing John Ratcliffe, who's leading that, is now declassifying this. It's driving the intelligence community crazy, but.
Is that what it is, Senator? Is there a bureau? I mean, these faces that I mentioned, Durham, Barr, Senator Graham, the president, these are the faces of this debate and this argument. But are there just apparatchiks, functionaries in lower levels of government underneath these people that I just mentioned that we don't see that basically really govern and control whether things are released or seen and protocols and procedures? Is that it?
That is a huge part of it, that the institutional career bureaucracy fights against declassifying anything. They want nothing declassified ever. And in particular, in this instance, what's being declassified is evidence of profound political corruption at the tops of their agencies. And so institutionally, there's a deep bureaucratic resistance to making this public. To do it, you've got to have extraordinary leadership who's willing to be just eviscerated in the press, just beaten like a piñata and split in half. And most leaders are not willing to do that. It is not an easy thing to withstand the buffeting and the press of the Washington press corps. And actually, for on that same point, that's also why Supreme Court justices gallop to the left. And it's one of the things in my book, One Vote Away, I have an entire chapter talking about nominating Supreme Court justices and how Republicans have gotten it wrong over and over and over again. We're terrible at this.
Yes. And John Roberts is certainly evidence of that, Senator. The book, One Vote Away, let's pivot to that if we could, because I know your time is tight. So thank you for all of it that you've given us already. With Amy Coney Barrett, I think I've read and heard that you feel very good about this pick. But how did, for instance, President Bush, at least by conservative standards like yours and mine, in so many meaningful rulings and ways, President Bush and John Roberts, the selection of John Roberts we now know, yikes. Did we not understand, or was he not properly vetted how he viewed certain rulings, chief among them Obamacare as a tax? How we didn't see that coming, Senator. Why?
Well, it was a serious mistake. And so the last chapter of the book, what I do is I trace the history of Supreme Court nominations, starting with Dwight D. Eisenhower. Democrats get this right. Virtually 100% of their nominees vote exactly as the Democrats would want on virtually every case.
Right.
Republicans, we don't even bat 500. We're terrible at it. Many of the worst judicial activists who've ever served on the court were Republican appointees.
Amazing.
Earl Warren, Bill Brennan, John Paul Stevens, David Souter, Harry Blackmun, the author of Roe versus Wade, was a Republican appointee. We keep doing this to ourselves. And what I trace in the book is this is not an accident. It's not just that people aren't very good at it. There's a clear and discernible pattern. If you look at those justices who've remained faithful to the Constitution, faithful to their oath, people like Antonin Scalia, like Clarence Thomas, like Sam Alito, like my old boss, Chief Justice William Rehnquist, they all have similar characteristics. They've all served in the executive branch. They have all defended conservative principles, defended the Constitution. They have a proven record, and critically, and this is what is most important, I believe, they've been pounded in the press. They have been demonized, and they haven't wavered. And it's the ability to go through that fiery cauldron that differentiates them. On the other hand, every time a Republican nominates someone who is a stealth candidate, who doesn't really have that proven record, but someone says, trust me, they'll be great, almost without exception, they turn into a train wreck. and so let me give you a couple of specific examples. I focus on some decision points. George Herbert Walker Bush. In one room was David Souter. In another room in the White House was Edith Jones, the strongest conservative judge in the country on the Fifth Circuit, just a rock-ribbed conservative. Bush picked Souter. Why? Because Jones would have been a harder confirmation fight. She was a real conservative. There was no hiding it. And they said, no, let's go with the easy Souter nomination. Instead, Souter turned into the leader of the left. It was an absolute train wreck. Fast forward to Bush 43. George W. Bush has in one room John Roberts, and in another room Mike Ludig. Mike was my former boss on the Court of Appeals. He was, just like Edith Jones before him, he was hands down the strongest conservative judge in the country. No dispute about it. But nominating Ludig would have been a fight. He was indisputably a conservative. He'd been through those fights. And so George W. Bush picked John Roberts, the easier choice. It was an easier confirmation. And for that matter, look, in the book, I'm also quite critical of Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. With both of them, Kavanaugh in particular, Kavanaugh's record is very much like John Roberts' record, and I'm quite worried. Now, we won't really know what kind of justices they are until for a decade at least. That's how these decisions are measured. But for both of those vacancies, I can tell you I urge the president to nominate Senator Mike Lee. I think Mike, 50 years from now, I am certain that Mike Lee would be faithful to the Constitution and that no amount of press demonization could change that. And I think with the picks that we saw, that we don't have that same level of confidence, and we keep making that choice and getting it wrong, and it has enormous consequences.
You were on the president's list, Senator, and out of curiosity, I mean, I know the ship has sailed. Amy Coney Barrett was the pick. Yeah. Is that something, I mean, if you got that call, is that something you'd have to seriously entertain?
So it isn't. That's a decision that I have confronted very directly, and one of the things I write about in the book is that for each of the three vacancies under President Trump, the president has talked to me very seriously about potentially going to the court, and I described that in great detail. The most extensive conversation was the first vacancy, was the Scalia vacancy. Mm-hmm. And in November of 2016, I flew up to New York and spent 4.5 hours at Trump Tower with the president and his senior team. And he leaned in quite hard on the Scalia vacancy, asked me if I was interested, if I was willing to do it. And I told him no. I just said flat out I didn't want the job. And I'll confess, it's something that I really wrestled with. And I write about this in the book as well, that I came home and spent the next couple of weeks really thinking about it, praying about it. I don't want to be on the court, but Justice Scalia is someone who I knew personally. He is truly a legendary figure and someone who I revere. And to have the possibility to succeed him, I mean, it takes your breath away. But And a lot of people, Chris, are puzzled. Well, why don't you want to be on the court? That surprises them, given my background.
Right.
But I'll tell you why I don't. Because a principled judge stays out of political fights, stays out of policy fights. If I were a judge, I'd do that. I'd stay out of the fights. I don't want to stay out of the fights. I want to be right in the middle of these political fights. If you look at the Senate, ask yourself right now, who in the Senate actually stands up and leads on the big fights that matter? And there are not a whole lot of conservative warriors who serve in the political world. And so I think Supreme Court justices matter immensely. I want to be part of nominating and confirming, I hope, 2, 3, 4, 5 strong constitutionalist judges. I just don't want me to be one of them. And so for each of the 3 vacancies, I've told the president I don't want the job. He hasn't offered it to me, but he's talked to me seriously about it, and I've said no, I don't want to do that.
I respect that. That makes sense. These hearings, Senator, going forward, I think we all, however they end up winding up, I guess it'll be a shortened, a kind of a truncated because of COVID, maybe a 3-day span of hearings, Q&A. We expect her to become confirmed. This notion of packing the court, though, if Joe Biden should become president of the United States, and let's say Democrats run the tables and take total control of Congress, is that first item up for bids? Is that a serious, earnest proposal on the table from Democrats, more Supreme Court justices?
I think it is deadly serious. I think if they win, if, God forbid, we wake up in January with Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer in charge, they will do more damage in 2 years than Obama did in 8. And I think one of the things that they will do is pack the court, increase the court from 9 to maybe 11 or 13 judges to immediately have a liberal majority in the court. And actually, that's really why I wrote the book One Vote Away. I wrote this book back in the spring and summer of this year, and it was during COVID lockdown. And I was at home in Houston and was working from home, and sat in my living room, pulled out my laptop to write the book. And the book, each chapter of the book focuses on a different constitutional liberty. So there's a chapter on free speech. There's a chapter on religious liberty. There's a chapter on the Second Amendment. There's a chapter on U.S. sovereignty. There's a chapter on democracy and elections and Bush versus Gore, which could become front and center. We could see a very similar battle coming up next month. And what I do in the chapters, it's not an academic book. It's not a theoretical book. What I do in each chapter is tell war stories. Try to really bring the reader behind the scenes and behind the curtain to understand what's happening at the court, understand who the justices are. And in the book, I focus on the big landmark cases, many of which I personally helped litigate. And so it's designed, you don't have to be a lawyer to enjoy this book. This book is designed to be understandable and fun and really give you the insight on what's happening. And Chris, I got to say, it's stunning. On issue after issue after issue, the landmark cases are 5-4. We're just one vote away from losing our most precious and fundamental liberties.
Senator Ted Cruz, you have been so generous with your time. I'll ask you briefly, what the heck happened with Bill O'Brien down there in Texas, my friend? Was that a surprise to you? You still following your team down there?
I have to say it wasn't that much of a surprise that the Texans haven't managed to win a whole lot. I'll also confess I'm just not watching football like I used to.
I know.
I'm
not either.
To DVR every game and watch them.
Yeah.
I haven't watched a game this season, and it's just sports has become so politicized. I got in a Twitter battle yesterday with Mark Cuban on this topic where sports.
You love the NBA. If people don't know this, by the way, we talked last year. Your love of the NBA. I mean, you're a basketball freak. Like, you know it like the back of your hand.
I am a diehard Houston Rockets fan. So during the season, I DVR every Rockets game. So I watched the entire season. I was at Game 7 of the NBA Finals in 1994 when the Rockets beat the Knicks and we won our first championship ever. And I still remember Houston had never won any championship in any sport. And that night I remember standing outside the Summit where the game was played on Richmond, and you had businessmen in three-piece suits crying and hugging homeless men. I mean, it was an amazing illustration of how sports can bring people together, and it was the most. So I love the Rockets, and I hate seeing how the NBA has just become this leftist political lecture, and they're insulting their fans. I will say, by the way, all right, I'm going to say something really controversial. I'm also an Astros fan, and it's look. I've watched every Astros game this series, and okay, I know everyone loves to hate the Astros right now, and I understand it. Although the 2017 World Series was amazing for Houston. And I am kind of enjoying. So the Stros have won 4 in a row, and I do think the best cure for all of those who are hating on the Astros is just win, and then they're playing really good baseball right now.
See, you're going to get a bunch of trash cans sent to you now as joke in a mail.
I know.
You know?
And look, and I cannot defend what they did. It is every Houston fan. It's just sort of. It weighs on you, but there's still some really talented ball players. So it would be, I'm hoping they just let their performance speak for itself.
And congratulations on the podcast, by the way, which was a smashing success. I mean, one of the most listened to out there, as a matter of fact. Congratulations.
Well, it has been great fun. We launched Verdict with Ted Cruz in January, and it became the -- ranked podcast in the world.
Amazing.
And it's been we've had over 19 million downloads, and we engage in depth and substance. You know, actually, there's an interesting connection between the podcast and the book One Vote Away. In both instances, I think the reason people like the podcast Verdict is that it takes them behind the scenes what's going on in the Senate. And I spent a lot of time really explaining what happens in the cloakroom, like stuff you can't get on the news, stuff you can't get anywhere else to really understand it. What I try to do in the book One Vote Away is do the same thing with the Supreme Court, where I think there are a lot of people that know the court's important, but it can be kind of confusing. It's kind of hard to figure out what's going on there. And you don't have a lot of people who are involved on the inside really explaining it in English. And, I've been really, really encouraged. I mean, the book right now is the #1 bestseller in the country on Amazon. And I think it's because people want to understand. And so, look, I would encourage your listeners, if you want to understand what's happening at the court, what the stakes are, if you want to understand better what's at stake in the 2020 election, and how it impacts your life and your rights. And if you want to understand better what is going on in this epic battle over Judge Barrett's confirmation, the book One Vote Away, I think, is helpful. It's understandable. It's easy to read, but it'll give you insights so that when you're talking with your friends, when you're talking with your family, when you're talking whether at the water cooler or in a Zoom hangout about going on in the country, that you'll be well informed and have a level of understanding that I think will be helpful, and I think people are enjoying.
I am letting you go, but I can't now. I looked up at the monitor, and I just very quickly, I'm not going to make you speak on her behalf. I just want to know what you make of Carly Fiorina, who you'd identified as someone you'd make your vice president at one point if you'd become president. She's now, I just see her on Fox as we're talking about her support for Joe Biden. Does that disappoint, surprise you? What do you think?
It does disappoint me. I think very highly of Carly. I think she's very talented and very capable. I disagree with her on this. And I wish she wasn't doing it, but everyone has to make their own choices.
Understood. Yeah, I just had to ask while I saw her. Just popped in my mind. Senator, you've been so generous with your time. One vote away. I hope everybody goes and reads this book and listens to your podcast Verdict. I think the world of you and Heidi and your girls. You're just a wonderful family, and I wish you nothing but blessings and health. And I hope you're in the Senate and in public service for a very long time to come, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it, and God bless.